as we are now going to invite Arron Keefer from the French Laundry to talk a little bit about his farm and his farming practices, and perhaps we'll find some commonalities with wine growing as well.
Hello. Everybody can hear me? All right, so I guess this is a very different take on farming than everybody's been searching for this today. Definitely less academic. My original background was in farming. I grew up in a farming community in upstate New York. I grew up in the Finger Lakes region, which is famous for wines now, but back then it was more corn and soy, and both my grandparents were farmers. I grew up throwing hay bales, and then I went into the kitchen when I was 17. When I was 17, I went in the kitchen. They fed me. I was indoors. I thought it was the best job ever. So I ended up going to the CIA in Hyde Park, New York, the Culinary Institute of America, and it's the sister school of this one out here. It was the original school. Graduated from there, and I decided to come out to Napa because everything I was cooking with came from here. And once I came out here, worked with some great guys, some great chefs, and had a lot of fun with it. But then once I had kids, the late nights and weekends really kind of cut into the whole raising the kids thing. So I transitioned back out into farming, and I haven't looked back. It's the best decision I ever made. It's a lot of fun. So I think I'm just going to go through the background of what I do on a daily basis and start talking about how we grow for flavor, because that's really our focus. When you look at what we do, we can't compete with price. You can't compete with economy of scale. So what we produce for French Laundry is certainly precious. Number one, we're growing on 3 acres of probably the most expensive farmland out there, other than Manhattan. And it's right across the street, but it is part of the story. And I'll talk a little bit about how we approach the flavor profile of these vegetables and the value that we bring to the French Laundry, even though, it's pretty pricey to produce. So my day kind of starts in the nighttime the day before. I send out an availability list, and it might be 200 items in the summer. And it has where they are, what size they are, how many we have. The chefs cook the night away, scrub down the kitchen, and then they'll fill out the availability list for the next day. We come in around 6:30 in the morning on the hot days and a little later when it's raining, and we start harvesting for French Laundry. We harvest early to try to preserve the flavors that are still there before the plant wakes up. The enzymes change later on, the sugars change later on, and so we try to harvest everything that needs to be harvested early and then take it into the kitchen. Then the rest of the day is farming, a lot of weeding, a lot of seeding and hoop hoeing. We have 3 restaurants, now 4 in Yountville that we work with. We have French Laundry, of course, and they get the bulk of what we do. We have Bouchon, and then we also have Ad Hoc. We just opened a new one called La Calenda. It's the new Mexican restaurant where Hurley's used to be. So we're working some more products into our repertoire right now because it's Oaxacan cuisine. I went to Oaxaca last year, picked up some seeds, and we're going to grow some chile dulces, chili aguas. They're like a green pepper that are known for drought resistance. You plant them like right about at the end of the rainy season, and then they set a huge extensive root system and kind of make it through the entire year without a whole lot of water. So that'll be a first for me. We'll see how they turn out. But when we grow for flavor starts with genetics, of course, and we worked with about 8 different seed companies, and a couple of them are Row 7, the new seed company from Dan Barber has been getting a lot of press. What he wants to do is start working with heirlooms and kind of work on disease resistance and yield. Because heirlooms have always been, the best for flavor, but disease resistance and yield is way low. And what we see in our stores these days is built for disease resistance and yield. You can't compete dollar-wise with any heirlooms in the store. So Row 7, we grow the coconut squash from that. Johnny's of Maine, I think, is one of the best companies out there. They've been around since the 70s. And if you want organic seeds, go with them. We grow Hackeray turnips from them, beautiful little tiny white turnips. Kitasawa is a really neat seed company. It's from the Bay Area. It's here in Oakland, and it does all Asian seeds. And that's something, if you're looking for the something a little different, definitely look into those guys. Baker Creek, everybody knows about them. They're over in Petaluma. We don't use a whole lot of their seeds because there's sometimes genetically there's a lot of variance. So we'll use the melons from them. And then also we get seeds from people who travel. Chili de agua, Espelette peppers, oyster leaf spinach. So it starts with the genetics, and just like when you're breeding dogs, you might have 7 different breeders. And out of those 7 different breeders of German Shepherds, you're going to have 7 different dogs. And so it's the same way with seed companies. We kind of work our way through all the genetics until we decide this is the one we want, this is the flavor we're looking for, the shape we're looking for, and we'll kind of stick with that one. The next thing that we do is we build the soil for flavor. And this is where we really diverge from grapes. Because here in Napa, everybody thinks that this is the best soil in the world for grapes, and it might be. But for annuals, it doesn't really have a whole lot. It's pretty barren of the things that we need. Because when you're looking at a long-term grow like a grapevine, you have 4 years to build up a root system. We have 3 months from start to finish. So we really need to push the fertility of the soil. And by doing that, we use worm castings. We use Mass Wiggles worm castings. They're produced out in Sonoma, really great company. We use compost from Jessup Prairie. Jessup Prairie gets all the food waste out of San Francisco, and they make compost out of it. It's really high-end stuff. Oyster shell flour, worm casting tea, compost tea, kelp emulsion, fish emulsion, and then, of course, water from the ground. We use groundwater. And it's kind of interesting how that one item really changes everything. Down at Ad Hoc, we grow with the same starts, the same seeds, the same soil, but we have city water down there, so it's treated water. The flavor is completely different than the stuff we grow over at French Laundry. Just that one little thing. The water makes a huge difference. We don't really cover crop because we don't have enough space to take stuff out of production. You know, you really need a 4-year cycle to do that. So what we do is we just pump the soil with lots of product and then liven it up with the compost tea and the worm casting tea. But at the end of the day, the best fertilizer, of course, is the farmer walking around checking everything out. You know, I wish we had programs where we could, you know, see where the irrigation issues are or see where the pest issues are. But really, we just kind of walk the farm every day, and if we find anything, we try to take care of it. The last step, you know, once we have the genetics and once we have the actual soil prep, and everything's growing right, everything went right, is the harvesting. So when we harvest in the morning. Some things are better in the afternoon, like strawberries and figs, because they lose a little bit of water, the sugars go up. And some things need to age, like the winter squash. When we harvest that, we let it sit around for about a month before we serve it to the chefs. But we try to grow with the season. You know, if we, like right now, of course, we can't grow any of the summer crops, they would die. But the winter crops are actually much more flavorful in the winter because of the cold. The plant will produce extra carbohydrates to kind of like salt water freezes at a lower temperature. It's the same thing with sugar. And so they'll produce a lot of extra carbohydrates, and the lettuces, the carrots, everything is way, way sweeter during this time. So then the summer time comes around, and we grow all the heat lovers. And really, that, like you, we're really dependent on the weather. If we have a cold year, we don't do so well with the heat lovers. We do grow down at Trefethen, too, right next to their bank of solar panels. And down there, because of those solar panels, we get the wind coming across it. We get about a 10-degree spike. So our peppers and our tomatoes do amazing down there. The last thing we do is we taste and work with the chefs. We sit down with them 4 times a year. We talk about the season, what the successes were and what the fails were. We talk about what we want to see a little more of. We're about ready to sit down with the chefs right now for the summer crops. About 80% of what we grow is historic of what we have grown in the past, and about 20% of it is what we want to try, some experiments. And so we should be able to get through, you know, I don't know. There's no scientific data. It's just the well-honed taste buds of the chefs, and we should be able to get pretty much a 95% usage rate out of everything we grow. You know, the chefs really work with us closely, and we meet with them almost every day. So, and when we when we're looking at how we choose the products we grow, definitely we rely on the chef's taste buds, but we also rely on a couple other things like traveling seed catalogs, the different companies around here who actually do produce good products, and we look for the trends. Right now, the trends in food are tropical peppers without the heat, like habanada and ají dulces, and flowering cauliflower, which if anybody's ever grown cauliflower before, you know the head is the bud, and then it kind of grows out and flowers, and then it turns into a flower. So flowering cauliflower is the big thing for chefs right now. They all think it's a new product, but it's actually just product that's gone a little too far. So chicories are really hot right now. Puntarel, endives, Strevizio, microgreens are still really pretty hot. Oxalis, believe it or not, we all look at oxalis like a weed, but it's actually a really hot item among the chefs right now. And I grow 5 different varieties of oxalis. Colors, shapes, and flavors are a little different, but they all have the one thing in common, a lot of oxalic acid, so it has that lemony flavor. Lettuces, Celanova is kind of the lettuce that we go to right now, and it's an interesting new lettuce because it has 5 to 7 bracts instead of 4 to 6 bracts. And so when you grow it, it's almost like a flower. And what's special about that is you can grow a full-size head, take off the bottom, and every leaf is a little baby leaf. And it really goes toward yield. Okay, so that's kind of my day and how we approach flavor. But I'm ready to take some questions. Yes.
Do you have something to share with us regarding? Do you have any insight as far as how flavor concentration responds to your water management?
Water management, yes, of course. That's certainly something that we can kind of, like right now we have no control over the water. It's just lots of water. But really right now we just have brassicas and lettuces, anything that can withstand a frost. In the summertime, the crops that we actually do kind of throttle the water back and forth are tomatoes for sure. So tomatoes, I first grow the plant and then I grow the fruit. So what I'm looking for is to just give it all the water it needs to grow big and huge, and we trellis it, and the tomato plants end up about 6 feet tall. But once the first fruit sets start turning colors, I really cut back on the water. And so I'll kind of only water twice a week, and I'll harvest twice a week. And so I'll stop watering. The fruit that's about to be finished will ripen up and have full concentration because it's not getting very much water. We'll do our harvest, turn on the water for one day, turn off the water, and let the next set of fruit ripen up. It really helps the flavor out, and it also helps splitting. Anybody who's ever grown tomatoes, I'm sure, has seen the rings around the top or the splitting. If your tomato's ripe and you hit it with a little water, that's when you get the cracking. So there's other items like strawberries where like I said, we'll harvest in the afternoon because they've lost a little water. The figs off of a fig tree, in August, when the sun is cranking on them, they've lost a lot of water over the day. You can have the same beautiful ripe fig in the morning and the afternoon, and the flavor is completely different. So we try to work it a little bit, but I think tomatoes are probably the one that we work with the most. Yeah.
I'm curious on the comment you made about different water having a big impact on flavor. Do you understand, I presume that it's mineral content, but do you have a good understanding of what is a better water profile? And have you heard of people amending water to change?
Absolutely. It's expensive, but of course then in the marijuana industry, they do reverse osmosis. And so they take everything out of the water and then add everything back in. That's really expensive. The groundwater that we have here is pretty high in sulfur, I think partly due to what we put on our vineyards, but we have underground activity too. I think we have, in Yountville, it's about 400 feet down that we have volcanic activity, so it warms up a little bit. But my personal opinion is it's all about the life in the soil. And so we add all of these amendments to the soil, right? And then it takes the microbes to actually eat the organics to provide what the plant's going to take. I think that this treated water is knocking down the life in the soil, and therefore there's just a little less micronutrients getting into the plant. Because to me, flavor is nutrition. When you're eating something and it tastes better, it's because we know it is better. Our tongue is probably the best instrument out there. So I think that it probably is just knocking down the life in the soil with the chemicals we put into our water to stay safe.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Can you give an example of some crops that you might rotate from year to year in the same spot?
So everybody has a map in front of them of the French Laundry garden, and that's a summer map. I didn't want to put out the winter map because it's kind of redundant. We just have a lot of brassicas and lettuces. So if you look at that like a checkerboard, when we put tomatoes on red, we'll put tomatoes on black the next year. So it kind of breaks up the cycle. Most pest cycles and most viruses and whatnot are they're used to that cyclical yearly cycle, and we're trying to move it around and break it up. Now, we have such a small amount of land. I would like to work cover cropping into this, but unfortunately, we have to push a lot of product out of here. And we do rotate as much as we can. Right now, I'm not currently growing any garlic to term up at French Laundry. I'm doing that down at Trefethen. And the reason is we have some rust fungus up at French Laundry, and it doesn't come onto the green garlic. So we're growing green garlic, and we'll pull that out. We've already started pulling green garlic. We'll probably go all the way till like the end of March, early April with the green garlic. But especially if we have more rain like we've had, the rust fungus will come out of the ground and kind of infect the crop, and it won't make it to a full head. It won't size up very nicely. So from what I understand, you take that garlic out of rotation for about 3 years, and then you can kind of break the cycle of the rust garlic, or the rust fungus. So there definitely is some rotation that we do for that. But, Trefethen, the garlic grows great right now, and it finished off very well last year with no rust fungus. So I'm hoping that holds true again this year. Yeah. Yes?
Would you rotate other nightshades like you do your tomatoes? So potatoes, eggplant?
Well, unfortunately, we do sometimes have to bring other nightshades into it because we just don't have enough space to be so careful with it. Potatoes, I feel like there's not as much crossover with them. One thing I am very careful about, though, is for any employee or anybody that comes out is anybody who smokes cigarettes or dips. They can't smoke on the farm. They need to wash their hands well, because there is a virus that tobacco mosaic virus that transfers to tomatoes really, really easily. So you go out and have a cigarette, and then you're pruning and that's happened twice to me, and both times it was when there were smokers on the farm. So that's certainly something I try to enforce, but it's a habit that's hard to break. But I just try to have them be conscientious and really wash their hands well before they come back. So.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to know how to get a reservation.
Yeah, so the reservations have gotten easier, actually. So we drop blocks of 2 and 3 months. So you have to stay on Instagram, and you have to see, they'll warn you the day before, and they'll tell you when a block of time is going to drop. So that's the best way to go about it.
No inside.
There's only 62 seats. Well, there's a few more seats now with the renovation, but there's a lot of people that want to eat there, and there's less than 100 seats every night. And
So what is it, 2 months in advance?
not anymore. So they drop blocks, and so when they drop a block, you buy it almost like a ticket to the theater. And so instead of going there and paying, you actually buy your meal ahead of time through a system called Talk. And yep, you can go online and do that. Mm-hmm. And there's an Instagram, French Laundry. the day before, we always give the info, so you can be waiting there. I think at midnight it drops. So if you want to stay up, you can pretty much get the pick of the litter. But it is gone usually within those 2 months are usually gone within 3 hours. Once they drop. So yeah, I know it's a crazy thing, but everybody wants to go there, and it's a small place. So yeah.
How do you deal with the bigger pests like possums and deer?
Well, luckily we have a pretty good deer fence with Highway 29. So, we actually have predators still in this valley. So deer kind of stay up in Mount Veeder area. And I'm sure there's a lot of management for deer through the vineyards as they come down through. So deer, I've only found 2 deer in the garden. One guy stuck around for 3 days, and I finally found him like in a little thicket next to and I chased him off. He never came back. So deer aren't as much of an issue as rodents. So rodents are our biggest issue, and we trap for them, moles and voles. And I have one guy, Alejandro. He is a killer. Yeah, so what I do is I reward him with 15 minutes paid every time he catches one. So if he builds up enough of a list, then he can have a day off paid. So it definitely helps out. And I've never seen anybody have the success that he does trapping. As a matter of fact, I farm him out. Anybody who has a problem, I'll send him off, and he for a fee he'll show you how to trap and set some traps for you over in your place. So yeah. But other than that, the pests that we have are, cucumber beetle is probably our major pest. That showed up in 2012, and it's abated a little bit. 2013, 2014 were awful. But now it kind of comes on, you think you're going to just lose your mind. And then there's a wasp that comes around and starts eating their larvae. So, we are organic in practice. We are not organic, CCOF organic, because I think it would cost me about $1,800 for the year to be organic. We don't need it to sell our product. It's more of a marketing thing for us. But we grow organic in practice. And when a pest shows up, nature always seeks a balance, so there's usually a predator that's going to show up a little later. I see 4 to 6 days later after something kind of explodes. If you don't panic and start spraying organicides, which are organic, if you don't panic, all of a sudden there's sometimes something that balances it out. Every now and then I do have to pull a bed. Every now and then I do have to do a spot spray. We had an extended heat wave this fall time. And when you have brassicas, they're super sweet. The aphids love them. And if you have heat and no rain, and they're just going to come out and go crazy. So we did have to do an insecticidal soap on there. It's kind of almost like Dawn. They're soft-bodied insects, so you spray them down, they dry out, and they're knocked back. So we do have to touch it up here and there, but we really do try to keep it, not really do anything, because I feel like I know what everything tastes like. I feel like even if I do like a pyrethrum or even the soap, it changes the flavor of the product, which doesn't really make sense to me because I don't know why it would, but it tastes a little more dead. So I try not to spray as much as possible, and we just try to be organic as possible. So. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Arron.
Well, thanks so much.